Hello again, everybody. It's time to talk about comic strips again. No, this time it's not Baby Blues, it's Calvin and Hobbes. For those who aren't familiar with the strip, let me clue you in. From 1985 to 1995, Bill Watterson wrote about the tales of a young, hyperactive boy named Calvin, who, through the power of imagination, would bring his stuffed tiger to life. From there, the two would go on various adventures, or talk about philosophical aspects of life through the eyes of a child, and a make-believe tiger. Throughout its 10-year run, the strip became enormously popular, running in over 50 countries and gaining an enormous cult status. But one thing set it apart from all the other comics like it. Think of some of the bigger comic strips out there like Garfield, Dilbert, or Peanuts. What do all of these juggernaut strips have in common?
Merchandising! Merchandising!
That's right, tons and tons of merchandise, TV specials, you name it. But Calvin and Hobbes never got that. No TV show, no movie, not even merchandise exists for it. But why though? It was extremely popular and clearly it resonated with a lot of people if it was gonna last 10 years. What's the deal? There's two reasons really, and the two reasons coincide with the two things Calvin and Hobbes could have easily gotten: merchandise and adaptations. Let's focus on merchandise first. It's noted that Bill Watterson was notoriously protective of Calvin and Hobbes. No matter what, this guy wanted to make sure that his strip was exactly the way he wanted it and had the same integrity that it had from beginning to end. Nothing was going to cheapen it for him. And this included merchandising. Many times throughout the strip's run, he was approached by various toy companies to pitch, well, anything. Toys, board games, clothing items, and especially little plush Hobbeses, like the ones that Calvin has. Admittedly, it would have been kinda cool seeing a bunch of little kids running around with their own plush Hobbes toys, but Bill Watterson didn't want any of that. No toys, no board games, no clothing, no nothing. He didn't want it to become a brand, he wanted it to stay a strip and a series of stories. Nothing more, nothing less. Let's compare it to a comic strip that is actually kinda similar to Calvin and Hobbes. Peanuts. They both feature kids with imaginations and semi-philosophical discussions, but Peanuts is a brand. You look at anything, there's Peanuts versions of it. It is a global marketing phenomenon. However, a lot of people are more familiar with the merchandise or the TV specials rather than the strip itself. This is in large part due to the Charles Schulz estate being very lenient when it comes to licensing. Except for now, which is probably why we're never going to see another Peanuts movie nor another TV special for quite some time. The Peanuts gang is everywhere, especially Snoopy. We could have seen Hobbes right up there too, but Bill Watterson said that he had too much integrity to go on for something like that. In his eyes, going to that level may have in fact got him more popularity, but it would have cheapened his brand. In a sense, it would have become less authentic, and that is the last thing he wanted for Calvin and Hobbes. After all, the strip was already so down-to-earth and relatable. He did not want anything to jeopardize that. To this day, the only real merchandise that Calvin and Hobbes has ever gotten were the collection books, whether it be the complete series collection books or the various themed books. So to answer the obvious burning question, no, those decals of Calvin peeing on things are not authentic. You know, something tells me that Bill Watterson doesn't really appreciate the fact that not only is someone bootlegging his IP, but someone is doing it in such a negative, unwholesome way. Although I must admit, some of them actually are pretty funny. The next aspect are the adaptations. More specifically, what could have been. Movies and TV shows alike were both offered to Bill Watterson, and right away he turned them down without a second thought. Let's take a look at the movie. There's nothing really to go on for a Calvin and Hobbes movie. Sure, in some of the strips there were story arcs that would carry out throughout 5, maybe 6 weeks, but that's about it. That's not enough for a movie, really. I mean, of course, there are some running themes in Calvin and Hobbes, like the dad's approval rating, or the bully, Calvin and Hobbes discussing the aforementioned theoretical aspects of the world, or their time machine, or Calvin Ball. But this isn't enough for a movie. To make it a movie, you would have to fabricate some kind of grand-scale plot for it to catch mainstream approval, and that's not what Calvin and Hobbes was about. At its core, it's just a little kid going on little adventures. And let's compare it to Peanuts again. Peanuts has had many specials and animated movies. But when you really get down to it, not a lot of them are really screen-worthy. They're definitely good for an hour-long animated short you'd see on primetime, but not really for a movie. Even one of my favorite animated films of all time, A Boy Named Charlie Brown, did not need to be released in theaters. That could easily have just been on TV. Like I said, I love it, it's just not really movie or Hollywood, you know? And there lies the problem with the Calvin and Hobbes movie. It would have been the same thing, just kind of something you could have seen on TV, but nope, it's on the big screen. But knowing Hollywood, they probably wouldn't have gotten the complex themes of Calvin and Hobbes and wanted to add something else in there. What specifically? I don't know, maybe they'd want to make Calvin go all ghetto or add a rapping dog somewhere, I don't know. Personally, I would have seen Calvin and Hobbes more fit for TV. But he turned that down too, and understandably so. Take a look at Baby Blues, the subject of my very first review on this channel. What happened to that? It took this wholesome, family-friendly comic strip about two newlyweds trying to raise their ever-growing family into this raunchy Simpsons wannabe that focused more on the side characters rather than the main ones. Not to mention the fact that added so many continuity errors and didn't carry over barely any of the themes from the original strip. But it's not just Baby Blues. So many other comics have gotten this too. Rather than list the ones that have got this treatment, it's easier to list the ones that didn't. The only ones I can think of that come to mind are Peanuts and Dilbert. With each of these adaptations, they had the creator heavily involved. Every single time something was added or something was changed, they had the creator's stamp of approval first, which is a very good sign. That ensures that you stay loyal to the source material, keep the same integrity, and most importantly, don't make your viewers and the fans of the original angry. But even with these loyal and well-done adaptations, things still changed. There were a bunch of characters in these adaptations that weren't in the original strip, new themes were added, and overall different tones were established. While this could be fine for something like Garfield that is super flexible and can really adapt into almost any situation, this doesn't really work for Calvin and Hobbes. It had too much of its own unique style and tone. Having someone else's fingerprints on it would only cheapen it and again, sacrifice the artistic integrity. Plus, even with the creator on board, things could still go out of control. Remember, Kirkman and Scott were supervising producers on Baby Blues, and look how well that turned out. The same thing could easily have happened with this one. Tell me now, would you really want Calvin and Hobbes to start talking about adult issues or have run-ins with their redneck neighbors the Flundersons? Or get involved in Calvin's babysitter's new teen drama of the week? No! No, we don't want that, we want Calvin and Hobbes. But unfortunately, like Hollywood, the world of television wouldn't really appreciate what this strip had to offer, and it would try to sacrifice its integrity. Bill Watterson knew this too, and you know what? It just goes to show you how much he really cared about this whole thing. Think about it, really think about it. Expanding like Peanuts did would have taken it from a pretty decently popular strip to maybe a global phenomenon. It could have happened. Instead of millions of readers, he could have had billions. But no, this wasn't what mattered to him. He didn't care about the money, he didn't care about the numbers. What he cared about was his art. What he cared about were his characters. He only trusted himself with them. He didn't feel right handing the keys over to someone else. He knew Calvin, he knew Hobbes, he knew Mrs. Wormwood, he knew all of the characters, and he knew them better than anyone else. Therefore, he knew what was best for them. And what was best for them was to stay a comic strip. And that made Calvin and Hobbes very unique. A lot of lesser strips that weren't even as popular, like Committed, definitely sold out, or at least tried to with mixed results. Maybe we'll get to that someday. Maybe. So I really applaud Bill Watterson for what he did. He took a stand, he ignored the peer pressure, and he stuck to his guns. No one was gonna tell him how to do his job, and he was gonna make sure of that. It's sad though that he ended up becoming a recluse after all of this. He's never been interested in coming back for interviews or further talks about a future Calvin and Hobbes adaptation or merchandise line. No, he's content with just living his own life and being him. Meanwhile, Calvin and Hobbes had a very good 10-year run. No dip in quality, and no chance of executive meddling. By looking at the long term rather than the short term, Bill Watterson was able to keep his vision of the strip intact throughout the entire run. And that wouldn't have been able to happen if he sold out like that. Still today, you might be able to go onto Wish.com or Alibaba and find some bootleg stuff. But not only is that not authentic, it's actively going against what the creator wanted and what he envisioned. So as cool as it would be to buy your little niece one of these Hobbes plushes, just think twice. Because honestly, I really don't see any difference between this and the whole Camp Coral thing going on. Actively going against the creator's wish just for some short-term profit. That is another beast entirely. So folks, that is the interesting story behind Calvin and Hobbes and why it never really got any sort of adaptation or merchandise line. Think about this story. What do you think of Calvin and Hobbes? If it were to have a TV show or movie, what would you want it to focus around? Alright folks, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Excuse me, I'm gonna go read through my collection books again, because I forgot about just how good this strip was.